So this is an HP T5710 Thin Client. Well, that's a cat. You're probably going to see that a little bit more in this video. So yeah, this is a thin client made by HP. This one's from 2004, but I believe they made these for a couple years. Pretty sort of standard thin client. One interesting thing is that the processor in this is a Transmeta Crusoe 800 megahertz CPU. So Transmeta, which is actually the company Linus Torvalds worked for, they made their CPUs to use a proprietary instruction set, and x86 instructions actually get translated to it using something they call code morphing. So the OS, whatever you're running on here, it thinks it's x86, but technically it's emulated or virtualized, however you want to look at it. So the company itself actually seems pretty cool. At one point they demoed running Java bytecode right on the CPU. So you have to wonder if other architectures could have been supported, or maybe other lines of their CPUs, not the Crusoe line, maybe they supported different architectures, but pretty interesting technology. Unfortunately though, that company Transmeta is now defunct, so I guess we're never really going to see kind of the limits that they are pushing their products to. So as I mentioned, 800 megahertz processor. From what I understand also, the processors were more energy efficient from Transmeta, so that probably beats anything similar from Intel at the time. 512 megabytes of flash memory, 256 megabytes of DDR RAM, and this thing even has an integrated ATI Radeon 700M with 16 megabytes of graphics memory. Ooh. Going around to the back here. Pretty standard selection of ports. Serial, parallel, VGA. Power, I believe that's 12 volt DC at 2.5 or 3 amps, which is pretty standard for thin clients. Got the locking port, single PS2 port. You'll see that's labeled for keyboard, but from my understanding you can get a Y splitter, so you can have keyboard and mouse. Headphone jack, microphone jack, 4 USB ports. I believe these are USB 2.0. And then networking port here, so that's just 10, 100 megabit NIC, yeah. So the reason I purchased this was because you might remember from my last videos on thin clients, or specifically one thin client, I used it for a programming machine that's meant to be sort of energy efficient, small, stable for payphone programming, for Protel payphones. So this one is for my next foray, which is Alcatel payphone programming. So again, this should just be a little box that I can just put on the shelf, not have to worry about it overheating, not have to worry about things failing in it. So yeah, that's sort of the gist of it. All of those bags that you saw just a couple minutes ago, those are going to be some upgrades that we want to do to this to get the most bang for our buck. But before I touch anything, let's turn this thing on and make sure that it actually works, take a look at our settings, and just see what we're dealing with here. Alright, so I have the thin client hooked up to the OSSC here. I'm gonna plug it in. Let's see what we get on the screen. Okay, it's coming up. Alright, I was spamming F10 to get into the BIOS here. So let's not do that. We could start out in system information. So like I had mentioned, looks like we have an 800 megahertz processor. We have 256 megs of flash memory. I can enter an asset tag, that's great. What else we got? CMOS features. So it's got the clock. So I did enter the date before I started recording this, so this is accurate. I'm gonna guess that the battery on board is actually still in decent shape if it kept the date, even though I had it unplugged for a bit. But I'm probably gonna go ahead and update that anyway. We can also see here, what is this? Yeah, so this is our actual disk. So it looks like it's either a 256 meg flash module or it's partitioned to be that way. I'm not entirely sure. Either way, gonna get rid of that at some point. Let's see. Okay, first boot device, USB. That's great because we're going to be installing Windows 98 via USB. Then our ATA flash, that network, that's fine. Peripherals, it looks like there's a lot of options here for enabling and disabling things. So we have USB, controller, keyboard, and mouse. That's great. What else? Oh, we can actually even configure that PS2 port for keyboard or mouse. Very interesting. But yeah, it looks like, oh, we can even do parallel port, serial port options here. Yeah, so I have a keyboard plugged into the PS2 port. It's actually an AT keyboard and then a USB mouse. So I'm working with a really weird kind of little setup here because I don't have enough space. So you can see here, got the small Vidionics AT keyboard that's really meant for some sort of video work. Sun mouse, running on an HP Thin Client. This feels like a whole cursed setup. And then, yeah, this is my view right now over here at the edge of this little coffee table. So that's great. It's good I can get this tiny keyboard in here. Pretty helpful. All right, so this set, power management setup. That's cool. We have tons of different power options here. Okay, and it's got onboard LAN device. So this looks like it has wake on LAN, which is also kind of cool. And I don't need to do any sort of BIOS wake up. Yeah, so I didn't really see anything that needed changing at this moment. Already went through here earlier. So we're good to just exit out of here. But yeah, this is a pretty bog standard thin client. Yeah, I do want to quit without saving. And I already did boot this thing up fully, and I'll show you just the opening of that. But this thing is running Windows XP embedded. So after the whole thing came up, it looked like somebody just wiped it. They did a fresh install. It said, hey, you know, restart to finish configuring your device, all that stuff. But yeah, this has XP embedded on it, which runs incredibly slowly, just as you'd expect on a thin client. But as I mentioned, we're going to wipe that all out. So no use sticking around with this. Let's dive into things. Okay, so we want to install Windows 98 on this thin client, and to do that we need to set up some sort of boot device. So I'm going to be using this tool, Easy2Boot, to format a USB flash drive. So before I dive into that, we're going to need that tool, of course, Windows 98 floppy disk boot image, as well as the disk image. I'm also going to be using some drivers here. So typical stuff, audio, chipset, USB support, stuff we're going to want to make the Windows 98 install actually usable. And then some utilities as well. So 7-zip, DirectX 7, WinSCP, and also this tool called PATCHMEM, which is supposed to let you use up to 4 GB of RAM on Windows 98. So I've read cases where some people just have 1 GB of RAM and it works fine. Other times it tells you you don't have enough RAM installed. We'll see how it works out, but I'm planning on putting 1 gig of RAM in this machine. So may or may not have to use that. May or may not have to take that out and try it with 512 megs, which seems like it always works no matter what. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So let's run Easy2Boot. Sorry if you guys do not have a Windows machine and want to recreate this, but this seems very Windows-centric. Probably other ways to set this drive up, but this is the working tutorial that I found, so try that out here. Alright, so we want to use drive 3. So this is a 32 gigabyte USB 2.0 flash drive. I've heard that you should use a minimum of a 32 gig flash drive so that you can guarantee contiguous files and not have anything fragmented. I'm not sure how much I believe that as a criterion for setting this up, but hey, we have it, so I'll use it. And also, this is a 2.0 drive, so I know sometimes USB 3.0 drives can cause issues with older hardware, so I feel like this gives us our best shot of everything just sort of working here. So yeah, I'm going to do drive 3. And it wants to confirm it, so yes, let's confirm it. We definitely want drive 3. And then it says use size 0 for default partition sizes. So yeah, let's do that. And again, it says it's going to erase, so this is going to probably take a minute or two to format. So let's just click that and wait for a second. Okay, let's try that again. I think it didn't like that I had disk management tools open. Okay, that time it worked. But yeah, we're past the formatting stage now, so we can just go ahead and choose all the defaults for all of this configuration setup here. Okay, now it's really installed to the disk. It looks like it's actually using Ventoy under the hood, or in part, so I'm not sure why that wasn't sort of the first process that they told me to go through here, just use Ventoy, but we'll give this Easy2Boot tool the benefit of the doubt. So we need to get some files onto the drive now. So let's start with the Windows 98 ISO. So we're going to want to mount this. So open with Windows Explorer. So we want the Windows 98 folder here. So we'll copy this. And then we want to put that in the data partition. So that goes right in here. And I think we can just drop that right in. So a little Control V. Okay, that was an exceptionally long Microsoft Minute. I think my eyes glazed over there for a second. Yeah, so now we need the floppy image here. And we're taking that over to the E2B partition and then into the ISO folder. So throw that there. And then we do have to change the file extension here. So we can't use IMG, this has to be IMG FD HD 01. Yes, I would definitely like to change that extension. So that part is done. Now we want to get the drivers and utilities copied over. So I have them zipped up. I just realized that if I bring the utilities zipped up, I don't have any tool to unzip, so I think I want to get this utilities folder instead. So I'll get utils and drivers.zip. We'll copy those. And then these can go back in that data partition here. And then I'll just throw these into the root directory. Okay, everything's copied over. I think at this point that we're cool to remove the USB stick. And yeah, the next time you'll see these files, we'll be doing an install. So I'm going to cover the upgrades that we're doing to this, but I figured I might as well take it apart first and sort of show what exactly we're going to be upgrading here. So this thing's actually pretty easy to take apart. There's 2 screws in the back here and here that keep the plastic shell on, which you can see discarded to the side over here. And then there's just 2 more screws for this metal. I don't even think that this is like RF shielding. I think it might just be like a structural piece, because otherwise you just got flimsy plastic. But I'm keeping this covered right now because there's a little bit of a surprise. So you might be asking, why did I choose this thin client? What's interesting about this thin client specifically? And if I lift this up here and show you. So yeah, we have a PCI slot right here. So this is a fully functional PCI slot. People have been using these thin clients running Windows 98, and then you put like a Voodoo 2 in here. You have a cool graphics card. Yeah, I thought that was something really interesting. And there's larger form factors of this case that are sort of based on the same design, where you actually have the slot accessible externally. But for these models, they just keep them in there, but you would never know that it's in there unless you took a look. So I think that at some point what I would like to do is actually use that, and maybe, I don't even know how I would mount it. Maybe people have been working on this for the past couple of years, but maybe there's some sort of like 3D printed bracket or something, or I could just get a like a 90-degree adapter and put an actual PCI modem card in here. None of that Win modem crap, but like a real modem card. So I was recently talking with YouTuber The Maritime Girl, Flo, and she's doing a review of a ton of different PCI and ISA cards. And it'd be really cool based on her findings to choose something to pop right in there. I could go serial in the back, of course, but it'd be a lot cooler if I had like a real card in here, and then I don't have to have external power for an external modem or anything. But yeah, this is a pretty clean layout for a board here. Let me just unplug the speaker here, hopefully without breaking it. Yeah, there we go. And yeah, so I already mentioned the PCI slot here. We have the battery back here. I think this is just a CR2032. I'll replace that. This is the disc on module here. So it's I forget if it's a 40 or 44 pin header that you just plop one of these disc on modules down onto, and that's your storage. That's your hard drive. You can sort of see here, if I angle it right, it is stood off the board on this plastic peg. And then the other thing that we'll be touching, spinning this back around again, the RAM right here. So yeah, that I believe is 256 megs. We're going to be upgrading that. But yeah, pretty clean layout here. This is pretty easy to work in if it doesn't wobble too much. And yeah, I think that this will be a pretty easy upgrade. There's nothing too complex to remove. But yeah, I'll be doing a time lapse of that upgrade. But let's dive into the actual components that I'm going to be furnishing this thing with. Let's get this all on a tray. Nice. Okay. So you can see that I have here 3 sticks of RAM. So my idea for a sort of a fail-safe is this Hynix stick. This is 512 megs of DDR. This should work just fine if we need it. And then I also have 2 sticks here of gigabyte of DDR. So this is 400. This is Hynix branded 333. Figure one of these should work. I guess I'll try the generic one first. We'll see what happens there. Standard CR2032 battery, nothing crazy about that. And then for storage, so we have these 2 options here. This is your standard compact flash adapter. Let's see, IDE interface there. Flash card goes here where my fingers are. So I actually had one of these come with the thin client. Another reason I chose this thin client, I mean, it was already set on the model, but why I chose this listing was because it came with one of these adapters as well as a 32 gig compact flash card for about the same price as everybody was just selling the thin client itself. So I thought that would be pretty cool. But when I got it, the adapter was like destroyed. And I don't think it was destroyed in shipping to me. It was probably destroyed in shipping to the original owner, but it was unusable. It was missing components and stuff, and it just wasn't worth it to fix it. So I bought another one, but then decided kind of against using it because I don't really want to use that 32 gig flash card. I think that that's just going to be a real pain when it comes to partitioning that and having it work with Windows 98. So instead, I got another disk-on module. So this is another, a pacer module. This is 4 gigabytes. It's very similar to the one that's already in there, but a little bit bigger. So yeah, we'll be going with trying this configuration first. Battery, RAM, and disk-on module. And then hopefully we won't have to do anything with the RAM and it'll just sort of work. But yeah, we'll see. Okay, so the thin client has the Easy2Boot USB stick in it, and it's booted up now. Before I dive into this, I do want to mention 2 points that were essentially issues that I had before I got to this point. So the first one was that 1 gigabyte stick of RAM, the generic one that I installed, did not work. The thin client just refused to boot with it. So I ended up falling back on the Gigabyte Hynix stick, which is slightly slower. It's 333 megahertz as opposed to 400. But from what I've been reading, even if I was using a 400 megahertz stick, it would clock it down to 333. So I don't think we've really lost anything. And I'm not sure if that stick is bad or the machine just doesn't like it. There's a ton of variables. But I don't think anything is lost by using this other stick. And then the second point is when I was setting up this USB stick and I was dragging over the Windows 98 floppy image, I put it into the root directory on the drive as opposed to the Win subdirectory. So I went back and I dragged it over there, but I'll make a note during the part of the video where I actually do that dragging that, hey, you know, I'm putting this in the wrong place, but please learn from my mistake. And if you put it in the wrong place, then this option here, number 8, doesn't show up at all, which leads you on a wild goose chase. But we're good now. So now that we have the Windows boot menu option, which I needed, we can enter into that. And then I can just choose that first option there for Windows 98 2nd Edition boot. Okay, great. This is what we want. We want it to be dumped down into a DOS prompt. So the first thing we need to do is to actually partition our hard drive so that we can make it ready for Windows 98. So we do that with fdisk. And then do we want to enable large disk support? Yes. This is Windows 98, so we can do FAT32. And then should NTFS partitions on all drives be treated as large? Sure. Okay, so now we can go through the fdisk options here. So first, let's display partition information for our drive here with option 4. And it looks like we have one partition that is NTFS using about 4 gigs, which is what we expect. No volume label, usage 100%. Okay, so we can go back to the main menu. We want to delete this, so delete it with 3. And then I guess this is a non-DOS partition. We'll try that out. Yeah, perfect. So we want to delete partition number 1. And then we can do Y to confirm. And then it says partition deleted. Excellent. So now we're back at the main menu. So we can click 1 to create a new partition. And then we want a primary DOS partition, so 1 again. Verifying integrity. And then, yeah, let's use all available size for our DOS partition. Okay, primary DOS partition created, drive letter changed or added. So we can hit escape to continue. So now let's look at partition information again with number 4. All right, so we have our partition on C, primary DOS partition. So it looks like we are good to go. Okay, so now we've created our partition and we must restart the system for our changes to take effect. So we'll exit out and then we'll restart with the Windows 98 floppy again. All right, we're back in the installation again. So we have our partition set up on our disk, but now we actually need to format the C drive. So we can do that with the format command, specifying the C drive. So that doesn't exist. I think I might need to go into D. There we go. Okay, now we actually have the format command. So all data will be lost, perfectly fine. Enter Y here. Okay, formatting is complete, so let's give this a label. How about just Win98? That should work. Excellent, so that's completed. So now we actually want to copy files off of this D partition on our flash drive into the new C partition. So I'll save the Windows 98 stuff for last, but we should have, let's just take a look in here. Drivers is a zip, and then utils is a folder. Let's make a couple of folders on the C partition. And now we can copy things over. Now that the files are safely copied onto our C drive, we can actually start the Windows 98 setup from the drive itself. So we're going to run through and just do the installation with default options. Okay, now that Windows 98 has booted for the first time, let us do a little system check here. Okay, so it is registering a gig of RAM, but I'm still probably going to run that patcher anyway. I do have one of those PS2 Y splitters because I figured once I got into the Windows 98 install, I don't think a USB mouse would work anymore. Maybe the BIOS or the hardware or whatever has some sort of translation for it, but I didn't want to press my luck. So I'm using this ball mouse on PS2, but I don't have like a mouse pad or anything, so I just have it on my leg. So it creates some kind of a crazy sort of mouse movement here. But yes, all right, so let's do 7-zip. Go back to our drivers. There is a specific order to install these drivers in. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is the IDE Hotfix. Then we want to do the chipset. Then the GPU. Then the audio. Then the network drivers. And then finally we want to do the USB drivers for Windows 98. Each of these, I believe, requires a restart. So I'm just going to go ahead and install all of them and then time-lapse it. Alright, so now we're in Windows 98 and I think everything's installed. So I was told that after installing the unofficial USB drivers, you're supposed to go in here to the Add New Hardware wizard and basically scan for devices and do that before you restart. I'm not sure if it did anything because it's still listing this device here. Yeah, we'll potentially figure that out a little bit later. Quick update from Future Me here. I checked out that PCI USB device in Device Manager, and it just wasn't sitting with me right here. So I went into the driver, and I did update driver. I think I can just do this process again here. Did automatic search, finished. So it looks like it might have found the driver here. Yeah. So we do a refresh. And now down here at the bottom we have Universal Serial Bus Controllers. So I think that this makes it actually working as expected. So yeah, the more you know. The last thing I want to do right now, actually not even in drivers, is to install that PATCHMEM patch here. So patch installed successfully. So as I mentioned, this has a gigabyte of RAM in it, and I have read so many conflicting things, and it seems like if you have a gig of RAM installed, things will be okay, but there can be weird behavior in Windows 98 after 768 megs of RAM. So I haven't noticed anything weird, but I don't know what could necessarily be happening under the hood. So this video is just to get the base system up and running, and I will definitely explore the Alcatel stuff at a later date. But this is pretty cool right now. I did not install all of the utilities. You guys really don't need to watch me put like DirectX and WinSCP on here, but I'll throw those on in my spare time. That's it for now, and I'll keep you all in the loop with all the stuff I'm going to do with this machine in the future.